time with my family because that's my number one priority. There's one thing you do today, change your mindset, get the bookkeeping up to date and run them. Because if you are spending a huge majority of your time doing admin tasks that you could hire a virtual assistant for 15, 20 pounds an hour, how the heck do you think you're going to get to that 80 pounds an hour across the year?
Hello and welcome to Get a Shift On, your podcast all about career change and career transition. This week, I'm so pleased to welcome Rayanne Armand. Thank you for joining us on the show. Rayanne is the MD of Root2Growth, although that is only one of her 4 businesses. She is an accountant, but as she was just saying off camera, doesn't do much accounting these days, as she prefers to do lots of other things within the business world. She's had a very interesting career, starting all the way back in corporate with PwC and Deloitte. Rayanne, thank you so much for joining me. How are you?
Great. It's good to be here. Thanks for having me on.
An absolute pleasure. Real pleasure. Let's dive right in then and start at the very beginning. Where did it all start for you and how have you got to where you are today?
So as I was saying just before we started recording, I came from a home where both my parents were business owners themselves. My dad had an IT and a computer business and my mom had her own pharmacy. And so, I don't know, I imagine that there's certain principles or concepts or ways of life that like naturally embed in you when you have both your parents as business owners. But I still went down the route of, like in South Africa, you have to study accountancy and finance to then go and do like your training contract. And so I did that and I started with PricewaterhouseCoopers PwC in Cape Town. And then when we moved over to the UK, like about 12 years ago, was with Deloitte in London. But when I was in the big corporates, I looked ahead of me, at the managers, the directors, the partners. And I was like, none of them, yes, some of them were aspirational and inspirational in the work that they were doing, but none of them were living the life that I wanted to live. They were there crazy hours. Some of them had kids. And I was like, when do you see your children? And like, I knew that I had this idea of how I wanted to be successful and also the type of family life I wanted and what I wanted personally. And when I went into corporate and looked ahead, I was like, none of those people are kind of fitting both those parts of their life. Like their personal is not quite where, yes, their career is amazing, but their personal life is not what I want my personal life to be. So I had that taste of corporate and realized that it just wasn't going to be for me. And it was at that time that I got pregnant with our first child. And so obviously I very much family was going to be my focus. So I thought, well, let me go and just went on my maternity leave and I thought, let me do a couple of days a week just lecturing. I had done lecturing at the University of Cape Town for a year. I'd been employed as an assistant lecturer. So here in the UK, I then was the level 4 AAT program lead, which is like an accounting course here in the UK. And I did that for a couple of years part-time. And then the real itch to be a business owner just kept like nagging at me. So when at that point, I had a 2-year-old and a 6-month-old. They were 18 months apart. And I thought, no, this is the time. I need to start building the business now. So because businesses take time to get the momentum going so that when they were older, I would then have that freedom. And so it was about building something that would fit around my personal life. And yeah, so it started, what was it, like eight and a bit years ago.
Wow. Amazing. Must have been quite a transition from Cape Town to London.
Well, you see, I don't ever really count myself as having lived in London. So basically, my husband and I have been together since school. So we've been together since we were 17 and we both went over to University of Cape Town together and studied there. And then while I was then working at PwC, he got an offer to come over to the UK to play for Exeter Chiefs rugby in Exeter. And so I needed to finish up like a few months of my training contract and I managed to get through like a connection, got like an interview with the right person at Deloitte and I moved over to Deloitte, but it was London based. But I was only in London weekdays and I would come back to Exeter at weekends. So I was never like big city. I was only there during the week and then I would escape back to Devon at the weekends. But the transition from Cape Town to the Devon's not too bad. Cape Town will always hold a special place in our heart. It's just beautiful. But I almost call Devon or Exeter especially, the Cape Town of the UK because you've got the mountains, you've got like Dartmoor and you've got the ocean nearby and you've got the the outdoor environment. So it's got like, and a little bit of this a city too. So you got like a kind of the best of all the different worlds. And so it wasn't too tough overall.
Yeah, I agree. Actually, I think we're so lucky where we live. We're only down in Torbay, so not a huge million miles away, but we've got the sea one direction, the moors the other.
Yeah.
The options are there. I would imagine those slightly smaller scale to Cape Town. I've never been, but I'd imagine the moors are slightly smaller and the sea is just
Yeah,
a little bit
definitely.
smaller than the ocean. Oh, that's really interesting. And it's amazing, isn't it, how family and the thought of family makes such a difference. You've obviously gone on now to have your businesses. So with regards to family, how important is it to you that you have that balance between business and family? And how do you manage that given the fact that you have the 4 businesses, clients as well, and
Yeah.
as you said to me, about 20 people that could call on you at any moment to ask for help?
Yeah, like I think it's about 20 people across the businesses. Well, firstly, I want to begin by saying that I don't think the goal of any business owner necessarily should be to have multiple businesses. So I think it's to understand the context of what I do, it's useful to say, and I can explain the 4 businesses, but it's not like a flex. I promise myself no more. I think it's like the curse of the entrepreneur. You always have these ideas of like problems you want to solve and you keep adding more and more. And I've just got all these ideas and I kept allowing myself to move into other spaces. And now I'm like, enough. Let's just focus on building what you've got. But that's also helped me to try out different business models. And I think I finally found like the model that suits, it's all about what suits my personal life. So you ask, like, we fit family in and how's it a priority? At the end of the day, I am a strong believer in that if you have a career, like an employed role, like a career, or if you are a business owner, you have to remember that your business is there to serve your personal life, not the other way around. And I think that script flips so easily if you don't watch it carefully. So very much the whole purpose behind me building any of my businesses and the strategy is that I need to build something that works around our children. And so, for example, my husband and I only work school hours and we try to take a large majority of the school holidays off. And so we make sure that any decision that I make in a business, if there's a project coming up or a type of product or service line I'm looking to add, I ask myself whether that can be delivered within the boundaries of the fact that I want to be present when my kids are not at school. And even when Don, my husband, left rugby, because he was in rugby for like almost a decade as his career, he then had to come to a corporate-based job. And he actually had a mentor, someone that he bought the business from. And they worked like the more typical business hours. And him and I had the discussion. Listen, we want our businesses need to be 2 hours. We want to be present for our kids. And he had to go through a lot of like resistance in himself and also the people he was working with to really drive that home. Yes, there are days that him or I will need to work till 5 o'clock because we're delivering something to clients, but the norm is that we don't. And you ask how we juggle it. I think it's a moving target the whole time. And I think it's similar to like raising a child who you think something starts working and then they change. And yeah, it's a moving target. And Don and I have this, it's a really simple tool that we came across. It's a really simple tool that really helps us to like visualize things, and also has facilitated really great conversations between us as 2 people in a household running our own businesses. And it's this idea of resources versus responsibility. And you look at all your responsibilities that you have and you look at your resources. And if they're out of balance, something needs to give. So are you going to get rid of some of your responsibilities, or are you going to increase your resources somehow? And there's various ways you can do that. And we frame a lot of our conversations. So as soon as we feel like there's the balance of personal life and business is getting out of tilt, we have the resources versus responsibilities. Are we going to get more resources in, or are we going to reduce our responsibilities? So yeah, hopefully that answers your question.
And what a great way to do it, though. I think having a tool or a framework, like that is so helpful. And I think especially more so when you're a couple working in a business together, you have children, you have businesses, you have to do something to manage that resource and responsibility. I love that. I think that's such a great way of doing it. And yeah, you definitely have to be adaptable when you have children.
Yeah, it's a constantly changing environment. So yeah, and we have a lot of support, because on that resources versus responsibility, we've always identified that we want a lot of responsibility. We want to be business owners. We want to have a lot of kids, but we also want to travel, and we want to, like Don and I have just managed to get a spot to run London Marathon together. Last year, was it last year? Yeah, we did the 3 Peaks Challenge, and we like to challenge ourselves in various ways. We have these things we want to achieve. And so we've recognized that. And for many, many years, we've always planned how can we get more resources. So like, we live in a very unique situation where on our property here in Devon, we have in one annex my mom and dad, and the other annex my mum-in-law. And so they hands-on in different ways. So we've almost like, and that was all, we actually discussed that when we were students at university, of like this vision of how we wanted to run our lives and have, and then we have other ways. We also get support from outside people. So we knew the kind of life we wanted to live, and then we built structures around that. Yeah.
I did actually know that. Obviously, I've spoken to Don before. We've had lots of conversations, so I did actually know that. And yeah, I think for many people, that would be their absolute worst nightmare and living hell, to have to be
people live such isolated lives nowadays. They like go and then they try and battle through it all themselves, and then they get so stressed because there's like this huge juggle, like a huge workload to juggle between 2 working parents.
And I think if you've got the ability to do that, if you have the resources to be able to do that, to have your parents, in-laws, living or working near you, to be able to facilitate that, I think it's such a help, and it really does.
And
work.
Resources can come in other forms, though. You can think outside the box on this. There's paid support, so you can, hire someone to assist you at home, or childcare, or to help you with cleaning, etc. But it can also come in the form of forming like a network of friends. If you find 1 or 2 friends with kids of similar ages, you can be like, okay, both our kids go to hockey on a Tuesday night. Let's take turns driving them to hockey. So one of on an alternating week, you can work later. So you can build up a community around you of sharing some of those resources. So it's about thinking outside the box and not thinking that you always have to throw money or in-laws at the situation.
As I say, for some people, that may be their worst nightmare. Many ambitious business owners, you kind of already touched on it. They don't want to spend their evenings and weekend worrying about finances, bookkeeping. What are the common habits, financial habits and processes that helps entrepreneurs kind of get away from the chaos?
Okay, yeah. So interesting. I never expected you to ask this question, because it kind of goes down the route. Yeah, it was just down the route of saying that I've actually spent 2025 finally building. It's something I've wanted to build for a while, and that was the 4th business that I added to my stack. But it's going back to where I started. If you remember my journey from a moment ago, I started off actually lecturing at the University of Cape Town. That was my first official job. I was employed by them as a tutor while I was studying, to tutor students in years below. And then I sat on to lecture. And then as soon as the corporate didn't work, I went back to teaching for a bit. When I started my business, I also started teaching, and I ran in-person workshops. But I found I just wasn't sure how I wanted to have an impact on businesses. So that's when I've shifted to more building a typical accounting practice. I'll come back around to your question, but just the businesses that I have is I run 2 accounting practices in very different niches. That's why they're completely separate. And then my husband and I have a swimming pool hire business, and then I've got this digital course business, which is the route I'm going to go down. So what I've come back now full circle, like 5-6 years later, is coming back to this education piece and helping people to actually use their numbers in business to make decisions. There's so much else they should use to inform their decisions in business, but often it's just like they're afraid of the numbers, or they're not sure how to get the information. And so you talk about specifically around finances, how can people in business use that information? And I think I jokingly call myself a bit of a machine queen. So the background to that story is that when I was starting my accounting practice, it grew really quickly, but I started working crazy hours. So there's definitely this friction point that I just wasn't spending the time I wanted with my kids. So I've had moments like that. I haven't always been able to keep it to school hours, and there's been, it's been stressful. I was firefighting, and it was all reactive, and I realized I came to this crunch point where I was like, I can't carry on. This is not serving my personal life. I think maybe I just go back to working in an employed role. And Don said to me, we sat down and chatted, and he said to me, you know what, you've got a great client base. Like, your options are go find an employed role. But look, you've got these great clients. So why don't you see how you can kind of structure your business to get it working? And so I stripped it back to basics and kind of built it again. Like, I kept those clients, but I kind of went back to the basics. And I realized that to truly get rid of that reactivity and that stress is that you really do need structures and processes, like building machines within your business. And so I think what a lot of business owners are missing with their finance side, and actually all parts of their business, but if we focus on the finance element, is they don't have like checklists and processes and structures that run that for their business. That it is, again, reactive. They know they should, if they're doing their own bookkeeping, they know they should be going in once a week or at least once a month to do their bookkeeping and keep that visibility, but they don't do it. And they're also not sure what they should do. And so that's where I've started. I built out a program called Become a Xero Hero. It's focusing on Xero accounting software specifically. And it's teaching people to use Xero, but what I've layered in there is checklists and processes to help them run it. But yeah, that's what I would say from when I look in, and from also my accounting practice, where we offer a done for you service. So some of our clients will do their own bookkeeping and we just do accounting. Other clients we look after everything for them. And we look after clients ranging anything from £15,000 turnover to £7 million turnover. So there's like a broad spectrum there. And really, it's about having, like I say, structures, but also not being afraid to look at your numbers. So I think a lot of people, they put all this effort into their bookkeeping because they have to keep Companies House happy. They have to keep HMRC happy. They have to get their tax return submitted. But they don't realize that information is actually there for them to use too. So they need to know which reports to run, to look at the numbers and actually look at trends and have the information that there's information there that'll give them the confidence to recruit that next employee, to buy that piece of equipment, to buy that car. And yes, there's other factors that feed into that decision, but numbers are a big part of it. And the information's all there in your bookkeeping, and you need to just use it. So yeah, that's my little nugget on that.
I think that's fantastic. And obviously, as a business owner myself, I understand that. And I do think it's so easy to get into that rut of just seeing the numbers, just doing the do, just getting it out there, being, as basically compliant as you can be. Yeah, absolutely. What would you say is that very first foundational step then to making a business owner start recognizing and using their numbers to the best of their ability?
Do you know what? I think a lot of people from the school system think to themselves, I'm not a numbers person. So they're afraid to do it. They almost use this excuse that I'm not a numbers person. I'm not going to look at it. That's like for my accountant. And so I feel like step one is almost breaking that barrier. And I'll give you a practical report you can run in a moment. It's the first step is almost changing your mindset a bit. If you think about a tradesman or an artist with a creative skill, they don't start with the ability to draw these beautiful drawings or do amazing carpentry. It's something that they work on and get better over time. And so you have to view working with your numbers like that. You have to tell yourself, I'm getting better every day, and be open to feeling uncomfortable, but just look at the numbers because they will become more familiar the more time you spend with them. So assuming that you got on top of your bookkeeping, because that's number one. Bookkeeping is the foundation on which all else is built. If you're any decent piece of bookkeeping software, QuickBooks, Xero, Sage, whatever you're in, you should have a live bank feed pulling through to that software. If those transactions that have come through are not reconciled, now that's just accounting jargon. Basically what we're saying is transactions happen in your business in the bank. You spend money, you receive money. Have you told your accounting software or your bookkeeping software what that transaction's for? So when 1,000 came in, did you link it up to a sales invoice? When you spend £500, did you say what that was for? That's what reconciling is. You're just labeling those transactions. So have you told your software what those transactions are? Because if you haven't got that up to date, then any report you run, any numbers you look at are going to be nonsensical. You might be like, oh, I'm super profitable, but there's a whole lot of expenses you haven't put in. So number one is change your mindset. Number two, make sure you're on top of your bookkeeping, which should be a system-driven thing. But if you're doing it yourself or you have a bookkeeper. And then number three would be, if you've got those in place, go and run a report. Don't think that the reports in your system are only for your accountant. Go and find the profit and loss report. It might need a bit of tweaking. It might be a mess. Might be a whole lot of background work, but run it. It's going to show you what have you bought in sales, what are your costs, and what's your profit at the end. So your income, less your expenses to give you a profit. You can do some cool comparisons of like comparing this month to previous months or this quarter to previous quarter, so you can see trends over time. And that's going to give you some really cool information that you can start to play with. Okay, so just run that report. If there's one thing you do today, change your mindset, get the bookkeeping up to date, and run that report. So yeah.
You mentioned the word uncomfortable then, and I think you're right. Many business owners are uncomfortable looking at figures. But actually, I think, especially if you change your mindset, that being uncomfortable drives change, because it means that you are then looking and you're progressing, because you are uncomfortable, but the more you look, the more you compare, the more you understand, the better it becomes, and then you can start to use those numbers
Yes.
to much greater effect. And I'd imagine that's what you try and instill in some of your clients.
Yes, 100%.
Do you notice
that discomfort? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to push through that. Do you think there's a big difference, or are the fundamentals always the same, whether you've got that 15,000 turnover or that 7 million turnover?
I think a lot of the fundamentals are the same. Yes, when you get bigger, you want to increase the frequency that you're looking at the numbers. And there's a few extra reports that you'll do, like reports that you'll delve into the detail. And it becomes very much, you have to do more forward looking. Like you have to do projections and budgets and cash flow forecasts. Whereas a smaller business, you can probably get away without that. And it might feel like things are more unpredictable when you're smaller. But the fundamental principles are still there. You need to understand where your profit's coming from and use your software. I mean, you may be using an Excel spreadsheet if you're on the smaller scale, you may be not on a piece of software, but understand your margins, like without going into a deep explanation on it, but understand like which product lines or service lines are bringing the money in, and what margins are they making. So margin is your sale or your revenue made from that specific sale less the direct costs to deliver that product or service. Okay. And so also with that, I think a lot of smaller business owners don't properly take into account their time. So they might end up delivering a service that brings a lot of revenue, but it takes up a ton of time. And if they compare that to a service that doesn't seem as flashy because each sale isn't worth as much, but it's taking up so little time, maybe that's what you should be focusing on. So I think you need to layer into your decision making, especially on the smaller end of the scale, how much time those different services or products are taking you to deliver.
What advice would you give to someone who runs a service-based business who struggles to understand what their time is worth? I'm not going to lie, there is obviously a personal reason I'm asking, because I have always struggled with it. Compared to services, I think compared to goods, when you have goods, I think it's much easier to understand cost, profit, etc.
Yeah.
How do you do that with a service business, and how do you make sure that you are valuing your time correctly?
So there's a few different tools you can use here. Firstly, I want to say, when it comes to pricing your services and actually, sending out an engager letter or proposal and then invoicing your work, try your absolute utmost to avoid charging an hourly rate, because you're just always going to cap yourself. So try and do value-based pricing. Like, try your best to say, I will deliver this set of outcomes for this price, rather than saying I'm going to charge an hourly rate. So that's a big one. And there's so much I could talk around that, but that's an important one to pull in here. And then another really useful calculation to do, and I can't remember the numbers off the top of my head, you need to basically work out how many working hours you have in a year. Now, obviously there's 52 weeks in a year, but you need to remember, and a lot of business owners forget this, that they need to take holiday. Okay, so work out how many weeks you actually really will be working. And that should be like 45, 46 maximum if you're realistic. Maybe you might argue 48, but I mean, yeah, if you want to be on the kinder end of to yourself, aim for 45, 46 weeks. And then know that you are not going to be 100% able to do deliverable work, because you have to do admin. You have to answer emails that is not chargeable time, etc. So what we're trying to work towards here is an hourly rate for your head. This is not an hourly rate you charge your customers, but I think it's so important to understand how much you need to value your time, because I think we often don't value ourselves enough. So what I'm trying to get you to work towards here is a calculation of your value. And that's really important, because, so we'll come back to the calculation in a moment, but because say you work out that to earn the amount, like the profit you want to make, your value needs to be even £80 an hour. Okay, that's not over the top, £80. Do you think, therefore, you should, if it doesn't bring you joy, should you be cleaning your house on a Saturday when you could pay someone £20 an hour to do it? Okay, if that makes you exhausted so that you can't then spend time with your kids at your weekend, or exhausted so when your kids go to bed you can't do a few hours in the evening, whatever it is, you have to, it's about looking at those tasks that are below the £80 and saying, should I be doing this? And no, and yes, you might not want to eliminate everything, but it also applies to like stuff in your business. If you are doing a task that isn't worth that amount, then you're never going to elevate your business to the next level. So you need to say, right, if there's 52 weeks in the year, I want to work about 46 of them. But in each week, I'm probably only, there's at least one day in total out of 5, if you're working 5 days a week, across the week goes to admin. Maybe you want to say more. So you're really only looking at 4 days a week. Okay, how many hours a day do you want to work on? So you need to get it down to how many hours are available to work in a year. So that's, you've calculated to that point. Okay, so you've got your 46 weeks, 4 days a week. You want to work 7 or 8 hours a day. Okay, so calculate that out. It's a number, I think it's in like the 2000s or something. Anyway, then you say to yourself, well, you might want to work to like how much you want in the bank each month. I want to physically receive £4,000 in my bank after tax. So you'll need to do a bit of a calculation, and you could ask your accountant this if you need to work backwards. But what does your profit before tax need to be? So work backwards from your after tax profit, or that ends up in your bank, to your before tax amount. And then let's say that comes out at, it needs to be £100,000 profit before tax. Divide that by and this is assuming you're the only one working in the business, by your hours you have available. You should not be doing any work in your business that is not worth that amount or less. Because if you are spending a huge majority of your time doing admin tasks that you could hire a virtual assistant for £15, £20 an hour, how the heck do you think you're going to get to that £80 an hour across the year? So that's one way to break it down. So you've made sure you're not charging your clients an hourly rate, but you should have an idea of your value that you need to be hitting in your head. And then you can run that profit and loss report and actually start to look at trends over time. And yeah, that's when you can start to delve a bit deeper into that. So hopefully that gives you somewhere to start.
It does. And thankfully, there's nothing there that you've said that I think I should really be doing that. So that's kind of good. Like I'm kind of, I've battled through it, but I think it's interesting for people to understand. And I think the value-based pricing is really, really interesting because I think a lot of people get very stuck and very het up on hourly rates, not just from the business side, but from the client side as well. You break it down, you say, this is what I'm doing, and people come back, all right, what's that, an hour? And it just seems to be a bit of a fixation with people. What would you say to a business owner who is being bombarded by a client that is constantly asking them to justify their hourly rate?
It's always such a hard one when you have you can maybe I know one of my mentors labels them as like vampire clients. If they're being more efforts than they're truly bringing in. And there's that rule, I forget the name of it, but that 80-20 rule.
Pareto's P's, 80-20.
That's the one.
Yeah. And I'm with you on that one, by the way. I like, if it gets to that point with the client, for me, that's it. I had that conversation. I'm like, you are not the sort of person I want to work with. Thank you so much. But if we're having battles now because you're arguing the toss over an hourly rate.
Exactly. And so I think you have to remember, if that's the only struggle you have with your client, they want you on an hourly rate, but they're a great client, I'll visit that. But so I might have taken the wrong spin on your question. Are you saying they're a difficult client in general, or they a nice client, but they're just sticking to the hourly rate? Let's break that up. Yeah.
Well, you could probably say either or, and actually there's probably good advice to be had on both. But let's start, they're struggling because you can't give them a specific hourly rate. And for whatever reason, they're stuck in their mind. Maybe they're used to having a cleaner that is £20 an hour, or a gardener, or, I think especially in those services, it's really hard for clients to sometimes break away
from that hourly
rate.
They have great clients otherwise, but they just have an hour, like they're stuck in this hourly rate mindset.
Yeah.
I would argue that you have not demonstrated your value, and that you've given them the option, that you've even hinted that the hourly rate is an option. Because I'm in an accounting, as a service-based business and accounting provider, I'm in an accounting Facebook groups of like, some of them are just, there's some that are, you have to be a practice owner to be in that group, and some are just general and stuff. And I see conversations often where people are like, suggested this price and they are questioning whether it's, worthwhile, etc. I have to admit, in all my years of doing it, I can count on one hand barely the number of times my price has been questioned. And it's not, I wouldn't say that we're cheap, but I think it comes down to, it's called like consultative selling and like how you deliver value first. So there's one of the mentors that I followed really early on in my journey as a service-based business owner is James Ashford. He actually used to focus specifically on accounting businesses only. And he built a piece of software that helped people, accounting practices, put together proposals. It's called Go Proposals, still out there. And he subsequently sold that. So he's no longer just focused on accountants. For a number of years, 4 or 5 years, while I was actually in the initial stages of growing my accounting practice, he was delivering tons of free content to accountants. And he wrote a book and he would do free training sessions. So his book, I highly recommend. Even if you're not an accounting practice owner, it's called Selling to Serve. And in that, he gives you the process of how you deal with a prospect. Because there's actually a lot of work that goes into the point that at the point that you've agreed to deliver a service to a client, there should have been a whole lot of steps that happened before that. And in doing that, it's the way you show the service you're going to deliver, the way you demonstrate it, and then the way you present your price. If you've done all of that, there shouldn't be an argument around an hourly rate. So if you're sitting with someone who's sitting and they argue with you on an hourly rate and they really want it, and you're like, well, I've got this great client, they've been working with me, we've been charging an hourly rate, how do we move away from this? Well, maybe either you're going to have to, if that's really not what you see in your future and it's limiting your growth, you may need to let that client go. But in the meantime, if you want to not just completely let them go, maybe you could do a bit of training and coaching yourself, read a book like Selling to Serve, and then almost treat them like a new client. Say like, right, I'm changing my business model. I would love to continue working with you, but this is how I'm going to be working going forward, and take them through that consultative selling process. So that might get you them from that hourly rate to that like value-based pricing. But I would say at the point that you're already discussing hourly rate, you've let that enter the conversation.
I think that's a very interesting view and the way to look at it. And you're right, there's that whole process that leads someone to that. So obviously we've kind of got to that stage. They've got their clients, they've agreed a fee, and suddenly they find themselves doing all sorts of admin themselves. They are doing everything. How do you recommend that someone can free up their time, again, to move away from that chaos?
Yeah. So everyone has a to-do list, right? But what you should have is a stop doing list. And I maintain one often. So I have it on an Excel spreadsheet, or you might want to put it on a piece of paper. And as you go about your day, if you are doing something that you think to yourself, I shouldn't be doing this, or it's not bringing you joy, but you feel like you're stuck because you're like, financially, I can't employ someone yet, or I don't have enough work for a full-time person. Start to stop doing this and start writing it down. And when that list gets big enough, might get big enough to employ someone full-time, or might get big enough to get an admin person in part-time, 10, 20 hours a week, you've got your job description written up. But a stop doing list is your friend, because I think when you sit back and know that you look at your week, you're sitting on the weekend, you're like, oh my gosh, I haven't got all my work done. I've spent another week doing far too much admin. You've forgotten all that detail. You're not quite sure where your time went. But if you have, literally, I have it on my spreadsheet, like a stop doing list. And when I feel like I'm reaching that point where I know I'm not being effective, I will then do another little audit where I'm like, okay, right, for the next week or two, I'm going to have my stop doing list and I'm going to build it out. And then I'm like, okay, great. It looks like there's another job role that's been created, and I'm going to pass that on.
I think that's right. I've never heard that before. And I think that's such a fantastic idea. What currently is on your stop doing list?
It's going to be some obscure things. I can tell you some of them because I've been doing this for a number of years, and I keep then getting roles in to fill the job. And so I've actually, I've always thought it was overly indulgent to have like a PA or a VA, but I've kind of gone down that route, like I've built little machines and processes and systems that run so much, like even in my personal life, but I still find so much of my time getting eaten up by like personal admin, and like almost because I am running 4 different businesses, I've got up till now people to help me in each business, but now I almost need someone who has oversight of all 4 that can help me like manage stuff between all 4. So I'm very much needing someone who can, like, I'm their job role, like my day to day. So it might be simple things like working through, and I'm laughing because it sounds luxurious, but working through my personal email and working through those damn school emails that come, those newsletters, and reading them, and then with all the dates, actually putting those dates in my diary,
Yeah.
and then like, yeah, those things that I'm like, you know what, this isn't time with my family because that's my number one priority. And what could I be doing with this time? I know my hourly rate in my head, and I'm like, I shouldn't be doing this. My time, if I spend, even if it's just like, the beauty of a stop doing list is you can so easily argue in the moment with yourself that this job is only taking me 20 minutes. So you dismiss it. But when you add a whole lot of those 20-minute jobs up, it then adds up to a lot of time. So it's those school emails.
Which are plentiful.
Yes, it's all the kids. But my husband and I will never outsource like actually running the kids to sport or spending time with it, because that's our core value.
Yeah,
but any of that, like admin, like around that, we need help with. And so, yeah, that's the sort of stuff that's on my list at the moment. But it's very different to what used to be on my stop doing list 2-3 years ago.
Yeah. And I think that's right, because obviously you're developing your businesses, you're developing as a person. Everything is always constantly moving. How is AI changing what you do? Accountancy seems to be that one of those sectors that we hear a lot about that is going to be changed and altered by AI. So is it having an impact? And can you see some positive benefits from that impact?
So I use AI a lot. I'm like very aware I don't want to become overly reliant on it. But if you remember, I don't know if we've said it from before we started recording or after, but as much as I have 2 accounting practices, I actually do very little accounting myself. But I will say from the bit that I do, I have tried to use AI just to like sense check like tax stuff or research, and it's scary how much it gets wrong. It'll be like a simple CGT, like capital gains tax rate, and you'll be to like, no, that was the old rate. And it's like, oops, sorry, you are correct. I'm like, well, how can I rely on anything else you've said? I mean, you can get it to reference sources. So I must say, as when it comes to like going to ChatGPT to get an answer for an accounting or tax question, completely unreliable. Where AI is really powerful is at summarizing information. So as a business owner, I've found it extremely useful. I don't know, I can tell you so many cool uses. So for example, interviewing. So we had on one of my accounting practice, we took on a really big project where we had to get 10 new staff members. It was this year. And I put the job advert out, and we had hundreds of applicants because it was actually for a job advertised in South Africa, because some of my team are based in South Africa. And so there's a lot of unemployment there. So like we're talking 500-600 applicants. And I knew that this was a possibility. So I'd made sure that I wasn't just getting hundreds of CVs, but I actually built out a Google form so that the answers to very specific questions went into a spreadsheet. I can then take that spreadsheet and plug it into AI. Say, I want these. It can summarize information amazingly. And I could then summarize that information and like pull out key bits, or I take transcripts from meetings and create summaries. Or my favorite way to use AI is that I feed it the data that I wanted to then give me the output on. Or I love the voice transcription is so good that I'm a fast typer, but I will often just mind dump a whole lot of stuff that I need to go into an email and get it to then put it into a logical order. So I'm using that a lot. In terms of what's happening in the accounting space, I've always enjoyed being at like the forefront of I love software and apps and getting them to talk to each other and automation. That's what, like I say, like a bit of like a machine queen. I love getting software to do a lot of the heavy lifting of things. And so I've always made sure to go to industry events and keep at the forefront of that as much as I can. So like I go to XeroCon in London. I was at a Xero roadshow just the other week, and I go to other industry events. It's been an industry that there's always been change. The software is always developing and changing, and you have to keep up to date with what's the latest. But with AI coming in, it's definitely moving even faster. Xero now, they tried to build some AI, which, if I'm honest, was a bit rubbish like a couple of years ago. But they now have like a partnership or like an agreement with OpenAI, like the ChatGPT, and they're actually getting it embedded into Xero. And so you're seeing this more and more with pieces of software. And so now you're seeing AI they did like a demo of it, go into Xero, like a bookkeeping accounting account, like a Xero account. And it then imagine AI inside your bookkeeping software. It can see all your numbers. It can also see across other people's Xero accounts. So it can get industry knowledge. It reconciles your Xero for you and you just checking that it's done correctly. And then you can ask a question. That's where we're going. And it's fascinating. So yeah, there is a lot of change coming. But like I started with saying, AI, when you ask it questions that when I've tested, gets a lot wrong. And so I feel like in the accounting space, yes, a lot more is going to be automated. But at the end of the day, a business owner making money and they need to make a decision around tax and how and what to do with their money. Do they want to get that from a human or a computer? I think they still want a human to have a look over what's happening.
Absolutely. And I think for all the reasons that you've just said, so I use it a lot. I've played with it a lot. And like you, I have found that numbers especially come back not necessarily the way I would expect. And I think that's the danger if you're heavily relying on it, and actually quite dangerous in accountancy if you're asking it for specific tax rates or tax breaks or something like that, and it gets it completely wrong. If you're a lay person just looking at this and you take what you see as given, then I think there's some real danger behind it. And I think that I see why people are worried, but I think if you are using it, like you say, to have it embedded in Xero is, oh, what a great tool. And I see it, and as you say, you see it in more and more platforms where it's embedded and it's doing
a specific
all these
role.
different tasks,
Yeah.
which is so powerful. And that's actually, that may remove some of that stop doing list because you can start to pull out some of those other bits and pieces. So your job is safe for now with AI, and that's the main thing. What does 2026 look like for you and your businesses and the family?
So we want to keep, we've only really found this year that we're able to properly start like traveling with the kids, because Don, my husband, played rugby and that doesn't really lend itself to traveling throughout the year. And then we needed different, you're going through different years in business. But so we want to do more travel and just continue to focus on the kids when they're not at school. And in terms of business, see, John and I have also, on a side, on personal, we've also signed up to do London Marathon, which is just crazy. I'm really not a runner, so this is going to be interesting.
Have you started training?
Yes, I did a half marathon a couple of weeks ago.
Okay.
So it should be okay.
You'd be fine. He says, having never run a half marathon either, but
it was my first half marathon. So yeah, early days. I'm more of a swimmer. Anyway, and so in business, remember how I keep saying that like my personal life very much drives my business life. And that's why even in answering your question, I'm like, number one is spending time with our kids. And I think a lot of business owners lose sight of that. A lot of business owners, again, I think I told you before we started recording, I, as an accountant owner, see inside businesses. And I see a lot of businesses that have what looks like a successful business because they got a lot of revenue. And when you actually look what they're taking out as profit, they're earning minimum wage or well below a market-related salary for the type of work they're doing. Also see businesses that are quite profitable and they get this idea that they need to grow, so they double or triple in size and they're not making much more profit. It's very common. And I think people get so caught up in business about getting bigger, like that whole like vanity, revenue is vanity, profit is sanity, and cash is king. So they get so focused on growing their business that they lose sight of what the business is for. It's there to serve what they want to do in their personal life. And I get it. I get a massive buzz out of doing business. Like I get such a thrill that at the end of the day, I always think, I know this is cliche, but when you look back on your life, when in your 70s, 80s, it's the time I try and learn lessons from people before me. And I even did the same when I started my accounting practice. I was like, let me look around for accounting practice owners that are living not just running a business, but living a life that appeals to me. Similar to how I left corporate when there were people, I couldn't see anyone's life that I wanted to replicate. So I specifically looked for accounting practice owners who were living a life that appealed to me, not just running a business that appealed to me. And I actually would reach out to them and jump on calls and learn from them and built my accounting practice that way. So going back to like people in business, they get so focused on growing this bigger business that they forget that they're building it to serve their life. And so you must always come back to that. So actually your business goals should start with your personal goals. What are you trying to achieve personally and build the business to that? So what I've spent the last few years doing is trying to find a business model that fits the life that I want to live. And I thought it was an accounting practice, and I love my accounting practices. I love them and they will continue going, but I've got them up to a size and I kind of have looked at the next step, like looking forward. And do I want to become a £1 million turnover accounting practice? I look at that and it doesn't appeal to me. So I don't want to grow my accounting practice anymore. I'm really happy with the size it is, but I also love growing businesses. So like keep the accounting practice. It has, its natural churn, and we do marketing, and that's growing nicely. But I don't have this desire to grow it massively. So I've looked for a business model that is going to fit around my life as my kids get older. And for me, that is doing a digital course. And that's where, so 2026, the focus is very much building my digital course, keeping my accounting practices going because I love being involved in that and I learn a lot of lessons from it and I have a great team. But adding on this training and education piece, delivering it on online platforms, that is the growth. And Don, my husband's in a similar place. He also has his online course, and that's very much where we see the next phase of our journey as business owners.
Oh, that sounds super exciting. Yeah. And I think you touched on it there in roundabout kind of ways. If someone is wanting to leave the corporate world to start their own business, we know that many people have fear about that, financial fear about skills, what people will say, etc. What single piece of advice would you give to someone looking to leave the corporate world to start their own business?
My first thought that comes to mind is that it's very personal and you need to do it in a way that works for you. I've seen people leave corporate who build up a savings pot and they jump ship. They say, right, got the savings, I'm jumping ship and I'm going to live off savings. I've seen people that maybe don't have that savings pot and so they slowly build it up after hours. So in terms of like the practical angle, you need to work out what's going to work best for you and your specific financial circumstances. Know that, yes, some businesses can grow really quickly and get profitable really quickly, but just don't think of yourself a failure if that's not what happens for you. I don't want to limit you and say that it's not going to happen for you because some people do make profits really quickly. For some people, it takes a couple of years to build up momentum, and know that that's okay too. And so one single piece of advice, I think I've partly given it, like just to know that it's your own personal journey and it could take different shapes and form and it might not happen overnight for you. But if you have that end goal, that vision in mind of how you want your day, like your ideal week to look, I always say like when you focus on your personal and business goals, like what does your ideal week look like? And just start to build towards that and make sure that you don't take on clients for clients' sake, but that you almost build the business with the end goal in mind. So like, if we go back to an example we were talking about earlier, if you get desperate and you take on hourly based work, that's going to become a crutch. So make sure if you look around for someone who's running a business similar to what you want and try and learn lessons from them. Look at how they structure things and work towards that and make sure you design what you're building now at the beginning and don't think, I need to get this up and running by any means and I'll get those structures in place later down the line, because it becomes hard. If you have a client that's paying you an hourly rate and they pay and the invoices and work out to £2,000 a month, it's going to be really hard to get rid of that to justify, ending the agreement with that client just because they're on an hourly rate. So you build these crutches unintentionally if you're not careful. So it's about being very careful of what you build and make sure that it's reaching that end vision for you. Yeah.
Thank you. I think that's really, really sound advice. And thank you for all the advice that you've given. I think accounting is always one of those areas that certainly people new into business struggle with. They worry about, we talked about earlier, there's kind of the bit that you don't know, the fearful bit. So you ignore it, you kind of put it to one side. And I think as well, there's an impression that accountants are scary or dull, and you are so far from any of those things at all. And I think that's really encouraging for people to see and understand. Thank you so much for your time.
It's a pleasure.
For the insight. And I wish you, and especially the family, all the very best for what comes in 2026. It sounds like it's going to be really very exciting, and I look forward to finding out more. And please do share any links with us around those digital courses, and I'll make sure they get out to the viewers. Rayanne, thank you so much.
Pleasure, David. It's been great to chat.
Thank you ever so much.